All right, welcome to Riffs and Rabbit Holes. My name is Jim. This is Charles. It's been a while since we've done an episode here, but we're here and we're ready to talk. Charles is done playing with his phone. So
I actually recorded us. I recorded us recording.
Yeah, he wants to try Facebook Live. That's kind of dangerous.
I'm kind of scared of that. Have you ever tried that?
I haven't tried it. I try not to do things live unless I have to.
We better stick to what we know about, which is
we'll
controversial theology.
Let the expert do the recording. So anyway, we're back. School has begun. We have just had our once in 100 years solar eclipse today. The world did not end.
It was a little anticlimactic.
Yeah, I still got to pay my mortgage. There's no aliens, unless you count all these people with boxes on their heads.
I did see a lot of pinhole cameras.
I was like, what kind of impression do the aliens get if they come and they see all these people with weird glasses and boxes on their heads? And
they might feel right at home. I don't know.
Yeah, you never know. So, my boss walked outside to walk his little dog. He's got this little puppy. He's been trying to potty train. He walks out the back door of the shop, and there's half the CNC department standing there with boxes on their heads.
Just another day.
He's just looking down like people are supposed to be at work. Standing out here with boxes on your heads. But anyway, so we're here to talk about theology and culture. Now, the first subject here we're going to talk about, this is Charles's pick du jour.
I just mentioned it one day. I thought it would be interesting.
Yeah, and it just should be. It'll get lots of people mad.
Not really.
Well, depends on how I react. I have a tendency to make people mad.
Okay, you're under pressure, not me. I'm supposed to say just whatever.
Yeah, okay. So, anyway, so today's topic is going to be on who is the Rock, not the wrestler. Okay, who is the Rock in Matthew 16? Now, of course, this debate has raged for centuries. And we don't expect to end that debate tonight, but we're just going to put our 2 cents into it. So anyway, probably a good place to start is just read the passage. So Charles, if you would go ahead and do that.
You want to hold it against me for reading out of the King James, will you?
No, not at all.
I like the King James.
Hey, it's a good sounding translation.
So we're here. Jesus is up on the mountain with his disciples, and he says, "But whom say ye that I am?" And Simon Peter answered him and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered and said unto him, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. And I say also unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it."
Okay. So, he told Peter, Petra, right? He said, you are the rock, and upon this rock I will build my church. So,
we might start by framing the debate. What is this?
Go ahead.
Most people can guess where this is going to go. The next, in verse 19, he says, "And I will give you the keys of the kingdom." Mm-hmm. And it goes on to say, "What you hold bound on earth will be held bound." This verse is traditionally seen as establishing Peter as the first pope, and then secondarily giving him essentially charge over the church and giving, beyond that, Catholic clergy the ability to forgive sins or to hold them unforgiven. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's not a majority interpretation among Protestants who don't see.
What
Jesus.
do they interpret the rock as referring to? This rock.
Well, most evangelicals refer to it, assume that the rock he's talking about is Peter's confession, which frankly, I'm sorry, I don't find that to be the best interpretation.
Why not?
Well, because Jesus is
Go ahead,
standing.
stick your neck out there, Charles. Go ahead.
Jesus is standing on a big rock, and he calls Peter a rock. Mm-hmm. And then he says, "I'm going to build my church on a rock." So he's talking to a rock, standing on a rock, talking about a rock. So where does this confession come in? Why is that a rock? He's already said Peter's a rock. He's standing on a rock, and then he make a rock reference. So it seems like it would be most natural that it would be either Peter, whom he just said is a rock, or the rock he's standing on. And where does the idea that his confession is a rock come into? I just don't see that fit in the context. I believe the academic term would be special pleading. Mm-hmm. We've got to come up with some way to say this isn't Peter the first pope.
Well, except the reformers would say that if you set it within the wider context of the rest of Scripture, the early church fathers, and just history, they would say that provides a broad enough context to say this is not special pleading. It's only special pleading if you keep everything else out of that verse and just deal with that verse on its own.
True, but I think the verse on its own is pretty, with the rock references, I think it's pretty natural to assume that the rock he's talking about is Peter or the rock he's standing on.
So you're making a grammatical, linguistic argument, basically.
I think that's part of it.
Okay.
And that's an interesting spin on it. Unfortunately, it won't end up being definitive, but
okay.
But you can dig in it. So.
Now, there's another view that we have discussed on our inaugural podcast. In fact, I went back and listened to our first podcast because we talked about it.
Is that the one where we were at the church and
it was a really bad one.
Table with the white.
It was a really bad.
Made a joke about somebody jumping out from under the table.
Yeah, we kept it just because it's our first, but it's like the little orphan stepchild.
So you're talking about Michael Heiser's
we don't
view.
Admit to.
I actually like that view.
Okay, now here, I'll go ahead and lay this out. The Michael Heiser view is that, okay, you've got Jesus and the disciples. They're in Caesarea Philippi. They're standing at the base of a large rock formation, cliff, basically. And at the base of this cliff is a series of caves and a spring, an underground water source, where there were a lot of pagan temples and shrines set up there. And the actual place, which was very pagan in nature, was referred to as the gates of hell. That this was a place that was considered by many people traditionally to be kind of home base for a lot of supernatural beings of an infernal nature. And that basically what Jesus is doing is he's getting ready to go to the cross, but he has to provoke them. He's provoking these evil spirits to come against him. And so he kind of throws down the gauntlet by basically going to their home turf and saying, upon this rock, referring to this home base, there's a geographical element to this.
Yeah, Mount Hermon.
Right. Well,
if you can assume that, which you can't by default.
Well, that's not Mount Hermon. That's after when he does the Transfiguration.
Well, but it's close to Mount Hermon.
It's close to it, yeah.
With the idea being not just a pagan temple, but the location within the land of Bashan.
Right, there's a lot of significance.
The fallen angels went there.
Right, in the Old Testament and references to these things in Genesis 6. And so he's basically throwing down the gauntlet and saying, on this area that you think you have control over and that this is your territory, I'm going to build my church here.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to do anything about it.
Well, and then the gates of hell. Gates are a defensive position.
Right.
He's going to storm the gates of hell and he's going to win.
Right. And so
I actually find that fairly compelling.
That is a very interesting and in some ways very, very enticing view. I have one issue. I didn't have time to go explore this before I came
time to
here.
Find one issue.
But I have one major possible objection, and maybe you've researched it and found something to answer this. Is there any evidence that anyone from New Testament times and for, let's say the first 400 or 500 years when you would have had all your major councils, is there any patristic evidence that the church saw it that way?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, that's a problem.
Not necessarily, because as we'll talk about in a later podcast, I mean, the idea that Jesus came to win victory over the devil, and just to atone for sins.
That view is very old.
Yeah,
that view is very old.
And I think that fits into this.
But, okay, that fits into it. But this is not exactly a passage that was ignored until the Reformation, okay? this passage was scrutinized from very early on. I mean, Augustine talked about it. Augustine, sorry. Origen talked about it. Cyprian talked about it. I mean, most of your early... I mean, you have a lot of church fathers that discuss this passage. And as far as I know, and like I said, I'm totally open to being shown that I'm wrong on this, but I'm ignorant on this. None of them even once thought to say, well, you know, I could solve this really easy. The rock is Mount Hermon.
No, not that I'm aware of.
So if none of them would have even hinted at this, that makes it very skeptical. And it's not like they didn't know the nature of the place.
It's a rock reference, and it would fit the context very
well. It would. And like I'm saying, I'm not ruling it out. I'm simply saying that it has no patristic testimony to corroborate it. It sounds like a recent innovation. That's the one. That's my one.
The Reformation was a recent innovation 500 years ago.
No, that wasn't.
500 years ago it was.
No, it wasn't.
Well, it sidesteps also the linguistic argument, and that's actually it'd be interesting to touch on that.
Okay.
Because this is where it kind of gets, people want to make it simple, but it's not. Obviously, there's two different Greek words. Jesus said, "You are Petros, and on this Petra I will build my kingdom."
And I've heard the Roman Catholic response to that is that, well, it was originally in Aramaic, and there is no difference in the Aramaic.
Well, I won't go there just yet, and I wouldn't even agree that there isn't any difference.
Really?
But it's almost kind of a wash. I mean, most Protestants would go to say, look, Petros is different than Petra, therefore Jesus has to be making a contrast.
See, I think that's the weaker argument, actually.
Well, we'll hear the argument. He's so if he says one word, you're a Petros, but you're standing on this Petra, I will build my church. Jesus is making a distinction. He's kind of making a joke. Good for you, Peter. You're a Petros, but you're not a Petra.
Now, if we're going to get strictly into linguistics, though,
well, the point is it's a wash. If you look in ancient Greek poetry, I mean, Petra and Petros are a little interchangeable. So to say that there's got to be a distinction, I mean, Peter's a guy, and you don't call a guy something with a feminine ending. Okay. So so to take Petra and call it Petros because it's referring to a man is not unheard of. So that the Greek to me is a wash. The Aramaic is interesting because if you were to render this in Aramaic, you would generally render both of them as the word kefa. Mm-hmm. And you would translate the phrase Anta kefa wa al kefa dana abne kanisha ashali.
See, this is why we have him on this.
Spoken with a light Syrian accent.
I like that. It's nice.
No gutturals. But if you go outside that limited corpus of Aramaic, though, into later Syriac, and you can find, among other things, not just kefa, but kafa. And you can actually find, guess what? Used as a loan word in Aramaic, Petra. So could Petra have been there as in an Aramaic text or an Aramaic saying to contrast against kefa? Yeah, it could have been.
It sounds like you're making an argument against what you said at the beginning.
No, I think the number one, the Greek using two slightly different words is not.
It's not the strongest argument against the Catholic position.
Right, correct. It is not. And I would secondarily also, I would argue that the grammar is pretty much kind of a wash.
So, okay, if it's let's say it's a wash,
which leaves us with context.
Then you have to go with context. You have to go with patristic.
No, I'm not.
I know how you feel about the early fathers. Okay, yeah,
I like the early fathers. I'm just saying.
I'm not saying they're infallible.
I'm just saying I would go with context to the statement.
But
there's rocks around. He said he's a rock. He's standing on a rock.
Hang on a sec. We'll put the Heiser thing on the shelf for a second. I know. All right, let's get. This is where most of the argument is. Most people aren't even aware of the Heiser views. So let's go with these two established views and kind of build on that. Okay, your church fathers, apparently somebody did a count of it, and 80% of the church fathers' citations about this issue of who is the rock, actually favor the Peter's theological statement, confession, Peter's confession as being the rock, or are ambivalent. Only 20% of these citations actually favor the traditional Roman Catholic interpretation. Now, here's the problem, is Vatican I, when it is making its pronouncement on this particular issue of the papacy, they ground it in this. Now, they'll tell you, well, there's other things. It's not just, yeah, but if it's not this, if this doesn't teach it, then the rest of it all falls apart, because the rest of what they say is built on this.
Yeah,
this is their rock for their rock. Okay?
It is indeed that.
It is. And what they say in Vatican I, and this is infallible, this is ex cathedra, you can't weasel out of it and say, well, it wasn't a matter of morals and faith. It is on this. And they say...
You'd have made a good Catholic.
Well, I was a good Catholic at first. Except I used to play those little things that you hang your hats on the back of the pews and snap them in the middle of the guy's benediction. The priest didn't like that. Anyway, okay, Vatican I. Vatican I says that this understanding that Peter is the rock is the interpretation, the understanding of the universal church, okay, throughout time. In other words, and I don't remember the exact wording, you can go back and look at it on Vatican I, Google it, all right? But it says that, in essence, and I'm paraphrasing, this is the only legitimate interpretation of what that verse meant, that Peter is the rock. And anyone who teaches otherwise is... what?
Anathema.
Anathema. The curse of God.
A good Greek word.
Okay? Galatians, you are accursed. All right? You are separated from Christ if you teach this. Now, here's the problem, is because the Catholic Church builds an awful lot of its case on the patristics. And they are claiming that supposedly the patristics were all on board on this. But they're not. They're not all on board on this. Only 20% of the patristic citations are totally on board on this. The other 80% are either ambivalent or go the other way. Augustine himself went the other way.
Augustine wasn't the greatest linguist.
But he's a church father. And if you're going to if you're going to hitch your wagon to the patristics and make them out to be, oh yeah, they were all in good with, Roman Catholic theology, and then you go and you actually read your site, they cite Tertullian and all these other people, but you actually read them in context and you read past that quote and you start digging into what they were saying, no, they're not on board on this. So by their own standard, all right, by their ex-cathedral statement, compared to the historical citations which are available, they're wrong.
It may be the case, but I'm more interested in the passage and its language and its context. And
but you can't ignore the other stuff too.
No, but I choose to look at the passage first, and I just
you should. That should be the first place you go.
I just don't see it.
Okay,
he's standing on a rock.
But you said it's a wash, so then you have to go to other areas of inquiry to kind of settle this, because
context to the passage.
And here's the thing, and the fact is, let's just admit, okay, this illustrates the danger of trying, and this is kind of one of the other things that kind of bugs me about it. You're trying to build the central pillar of ground of truth on one passage.
That's not a ground of truth. It's just an interpretation of the passage.
But they're building everything on this, Charles.
Well, they build a lot of weird stuff on it.
They're building everything on a wash.
Well, let them do with...
they can do that if they want, but they can't sit here and act in total confidence like, oh, yeah, you Protestants just don't know what you're talking about.
Well, in this case, I still think... I'm not sure what Vatican I... how that's really relevant to what we believe. Vatican I is wrong on plenty of stuff.
It's relevant in the sense that if you're going to make an ex cathedra statement about this, and then you want to also back yourself up with the patristics, and the patristics, when you actually examine them, don't back you up.
Right, but this is not... It's not an argument I make on Vatican I, and by the way, the weight... I won't say the weight. A lot of New Testament Christian scholars would take this position. D.A. Carson among them, Dale Allison, the position that the rock is Peter. I mean, when it comes down to it, I just don't see how that isn't the most obvious context. Let me listen. Peter, you are a rock, and on this rock I will build my church. Now that...
Okay. Now, but here's where you can go from there. And I think this is where you and I agree.
And I will give you the keys to the kingdom.
I think you and I may agree on this.
Except I wasn't talking about
not.
you, really.
If we agree, it'll be a shorter episode. If we don't, it'll be a longer episode. Okay.
So, Andrew, should we agree or not?
Let's just for fun say, fine, Peter's the rock. That don't make him the Pope.
I agree.
Okay. I thought we did. See, we agree.
Yeah,
I knew it. I knew that we would agree on that.
I think I take the position that there's something special about the apostolic generation, those people who Jesus chose, the 12.
Well, yeah, they're going to have 12 thrones with the judge.
And there was something special. Jesus gave those people a degree of authority that is not available to us.
Absolutely.
And in that respect, yes, they held the keys of the kingdom.
But the primacy of Peter is central to the doctrine of the papacy.
Yeah, but I think they're wrong on plenty of stuff, including that.
Right.
So yeah,
I want to kind of get this out there just as a qualification, okay, and just to reassure you, okay, I'm not bashing Catholics. Half my family's Catholic, okay. I love them. I prayed for them. They are wonderful, good people. I know Catholics who are better at expressing Christian moral principles than a lot of people that go to Baptist church every single week.
Yeah, I'd agree. And half of my family's Catholic as well.
Yeah, so this is not a Catholic bashing, but at the same time, anybody who's a serious Catholic, somebody who actually is taking the time to dig through things, has no problem with, hey, let's just duke it out here and, we're doing it in love, but let's get it out here and hash it out. So I just want to be sure, I'm not trying to be contentious and hateful. I'm not hateful. Goodness.
You're just obstreperous. I just see this as a passage, though, where evangelicals have looked for some other interpretation, and they've made an argument taking the lesser interpretation of the data. And that's frankly, it's just an approach I don't like. I don't want to come out with the view that Peter might have some authority, so therefore I'm going to take the other position.
Right. What it is okay.
To me, that's bad science. It's bad handling of the text. I'm not saying it's an airtight interpretation of the seeing Peter's the rock. I just think the case is better. Now, interesting. I'll make one other reference. There's a book by I found him Chris Karagounis, which anybody who studies New Testament Greek knows Chris Karagounis. Do you know Chris Karagounis?
Nope.
Do you know that I am mentioned on Chris Karagounis' website? Oh, well, okay, I was. Then he took it down because he misquoted me on a message board as saying this person named Charles Meadows misquoted me, and I don't know. This is true. And I actually emailed him and said, no, I meant this, and he took the... But he is a brilliant Greek academic who's classically trained. He has a fluency of the Greek language from Homer. He's Greek Orthodox, I believe. Okay. But very proud. And this is typical of a generation of native Greek scholars. Among them would be Genaris or Hatzidakis or any of these other people. But... And I'm getting around to my point here, which seems waiting. Weird.
I'm being patient.
I don't have that book. I do have one of his books, which is here, Chris Karagounis. I went actually to try to buy a copy of this other book recently, and there aren't any for less than $200 on Amazon, I think. But at any rate, a native Greek speaker studies ancient Greek for a living. He actually, strangely enough, takes the position that it's Peter's confession. And I was admittedly disappointed.
Well, I thought, disappointed?
Like, why? I wanted this guy to agree with me, but his reason is interesting, and I don't know that it's valid, and it would perhaps be dismissed by a lot of modern commentators. He says the way that the wording of the Greek text to interpret it as you're Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, the wording is un-Greek. And so the Greek text literally says, you are rock, and on this rock I will build my church. He says that's un-Greek, and if a Greek speaker had intended to refer to Peter, he would have either said, you are Peter, and on you
I actually heard that in the debate I listened to today about this. He didn't give the source, but he cited
or
that.
You are Peter, the rock upon which
Yeah.
I will build my church. We're using a relative clause.
I've heard this argument. Yeah, I didn't know it was from
That's
him.
Karagunis' argument, basically saying, look, I'm a Greek guy. I'm very educated in Greek. I've spoken it all my life. And as in my gut, I know that is un-Greek.
Is it Aramaic, though?
He's not a native Aramaic speaker, but actually he goes, in his book, he goes into a full discussion of it.
Well, let's just put it this way. Whoever, if Matthew was originally written in Hebrew or Aramaic, which some people claim, I don't know how strong that argument is, and was then taken and translated into Greek, you're assuming the person who did the translation into Greek knew Greek probably pretty well. So either way, like he said, if you're a Greek speaker, the language is natural to you, you wouldn't choose that wording.
Right, and that was it. That's one I hadn't thought of.
I heard that today, and that makes sense to me. It was said slightly different, but yeah, okay. All right. So here's a good, big, thick book.
That one actually used to cost $200. I paid $40 for it when it came out.
Picks. $200 books.
No, $40 book.
That's only 40.
I almost bought it when it was $200, but I waited until it came out in paperback.
Your wife made you do that.
I really almost bought it.
Okay. All right.
So we didn't really solve the problem.
No, we didn't solve the problem, but I think we illuminated a little bit more. And you mentioned what you said before, I kind of want to bring up too, which is the way that the typical evangelical way of approaching something like this is oversimplified. It wants to grab the easiest, most easily communicated argument and wants to build it on that. And as with several other things, it doesn't always work that way. And sometimes we have to take the more roundabout, subtle approach. It's going to take reading some odd church fathers from time to time and listening to people who we may not be used to listening to. And just building a more nuanced argument. It's a better argument, but it takes more time. And it involves conceding some secondary points to get there. And I think that just makes people nervous. Because like you said, they feel like they're giving too much away, by admitting, well, okay, maybe it was Peter. Oh, you're giving Peter authority. Well, yeah, he had authority. He was an apostle.
I just believe in going where the text takes you, and I think that's where it goes. But
it does. I believe in taking a text where it takes you. I also believe in bringing in historical context, bringing in contemporaries of the people who wrote those things and first taught them.
And with that, we probably ought to be bringing this in pretty soon.
Yeah, so we're going to end this up, but I just want to real quick get into a little culture segment.
Yeah, I told Jim not to talk about this book, but he decided to do it anyway.
Talk about this book because, everybody's talking about these issues now. All right. How much time we got left? We got 2 minutes. I can't get this in 2 minutes. I'm going to save this for the next one. All right. So I want you to talk about the book you finished.
Okay, so I finished, what was it called? Shattered. It was a book. It's just out of my reach, but Jim's going to get it. It was a book about the election and how Hillary Clinton's campaign managed to lose it for her. I was never a big fan of Hillary. Actually, this book I thought was fairly neutral.
Yeah, I've read some quotes from it here and there.
Yeah, I think the left people don't love it, but really I think it's quite neutral. It doesn't paint Hillary. In fact, if anything, it paints Hillary in a better light. I have a little bit higher opinion of her than I did before reading it. It basically says her campaign lost it for her. They couldn't distill a message for her. It says Trump and Sanders were pie in the sky people, and Hillary Clinton said, "No, wait, you have to explain these," and they couldn't package her in a way.
She's
to match
a bit
their
of a realist because she's been a political animal for so long.
Yeah,
but my personal opinion of Hillary Clinton, this may surprise you a little bit, is she's a woman who started out well and lost her way. She got under the influence of the wrong people, and they formed her thinking in a way that really caused her to just run off the rails. I think that's what happened to her. She got around Saul Alinsky and fell under that influence, and she just kind of went south. Well, she didn't go south from there. She went left from there. But, I think she's... Definitely once she incorporated mainstream feminism into her political thinking, then she really went off the deep end.
Her campaign said basically you need only these.
And that's the thing. She totally bought into the identity politics.
Right, and you can win the election by doing that, and turns out, well, no, you couldn't.
No, because you still got millions and millions and millions of unemployed or underemployed white Americans who are very mad, very resentful, and very disillusioned. Now, does that mean that they're all adequately informed on why they're in the state that they're in? No. But that's the reality, and she failed to deal with that reality, and I think that's why she lost. So,
and in fact, she did lose.
She did.
I thought it was a fairly good book and a quick read.
I have to admit, I do like getting up in the morning and knowing that Hillary Clinton will never be president.
Don't speak too soon.
She's done. She's shattered.
She is
just
shattered.
Like the book says. So,
with that, until next time when we have discuss another controversial topic.
Wearing the exact same outfits.
Oh, we better go. We better go change shirts real quick.
All right, we'll see you later. We'll put up some links on some stuff, including that debate that I listened to today for 3 hours of listening pleasure. Until then, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Riffs and Rabbit Holes. You can learn more about this podcast at our website, www.riffsinrabbitholes.com. That's riffs, the letter N, rabbitholes.com. There you'll find an archive for MP3 and video, plus a blog page and additional resources related to today's topics. You can also contact us there via email with any questions, comments, and even suggestions for future topics. That's www.riffsinrabbitholes.com. You can also find us on our Facebook page and also our YouTube channel. Again, thanks for listening. Peace be with you.